So thank you guys for staying with my fireside chat with Meaza. I mean, I literally have 2 lines maybe to introduce Meaza because I'm sure you all know her anyway, so I'm not going to waste my time with introductions. But Meaza Gidey is an international relations specialist and an advocate for human rights. And yeah, without further ado, Meaza Gidey. Thank you, Meaza, for being with us here today. So where should we start? I think I want to start just like right from the beginning. What were you doing? What were you up to when the war first began in 2020? And how did you somehow decide to step into the role that you're in right now?
Thanks, Melat. Good evening, everybody. It's an honor to be here. I want to say thank you to organizers of Wa'ala Tigray for inviting me and for having me here. Just so we all understand clearly, I'll speak both in Tigrinya and English. So just to begin with how I got involved into advocacy and also what I was doing when the war broke out. I remember it was past midnight, November 3rd, and I was still in graduate school. So I was doing my assignment. I was working on my homework, and I got a call from Tigray. A person called me, and I could hear gunfires from the background. And I asked what's happening, because the line was a bit choppy, it wasn't clear, but I could hear the gunfire. And I asked what happened, did they start? Because it was kind of obvious. We saw the war coming, so it wasn't something that happened all of a sudden, so I had to ask, did it begin? And the person said yes. And we could only speak briefly, maybe for a minute or two. Right after that, the line got disconnected. And the person said, neutralize gerna yomina, Tigray tsariya. These were the only things. And after that, there was no any communication whatsoever. And so I didn't know what to do at that time. No matter how well read you are in politics or diplomacy, nothing could prepare you for the kind of responsibility that all of us had to shoulder. So I didn't know anything. The first thing I did was reach out to TMH. And I called people at TMH and told them, I just got a call and this is happening. And they were already informed as well. So I remember it was past midnight. We went live on TMH and we kind of broke the news. I spoke in English. Alula was there. Haile Mikhail, the journalist, was there. We used 3 different languages and we broke the news to the diaspora. And I didn't sleep after that. I had to think ways of organizing our community. And so I remember I didn't sleep. The next morning, I was up with my glasses and my shash, and I was live on Facebook telling people to open Twitter account and at least to be active on Twitter because there were a lot of uncertainty at that time. So that's how my advocacy with regards to Tigray genocide began.
Okay, so keeping that in mind, that's the initial steps that you took. You broke the news, you used media outlets to kind of convey to the diaspora what was going on. In terms of your advocacy in general and also right in the beginning, is there any changes in the course of action you would have taken when you began advocacy?
Yeah, I mean, it has been a learning curve for all of us. We all did what we knew was best. We tried our best, but none of the approach we followed were perfect. There are a lot of flaws. For example, at the beginning, I was using Facebook extensively. That's how I got connected with so many people. And معات عقمي للوم سوات له Facebook active تكون تلقوا أو تويتر لنا رأي يوم we were able to establish so many organizations, especially those who were born and raised here, didn't know anything about Tigray because they were lost in this idea of Ethiopia like everyone else. So it was new for them. They needed a moment to learn and to figure out how to help Tigray. So maybe we could have been a little bit more organized and patient with one another because I remember getting into disagreements with people telling them, no, this is what we need to do. And they were kind of resisting because they didn't understand it fully. But I think from my end, maybe I should have been a little bit more understanding of the challenge because everything that was coming from Tigray was coming in Tigrinya. So the language barrier played a role in the gap of information that people had. But I think eventually we kind of mastered our craft and we were able to work collectively, especially up until our Alula operation. I would say the diaspora was very much effective in our approach, in our advocacy. And I think that's primarily because most of the work we did, strategizing based on our expertise and our knowledge. Our commitment was simply to amplify the plight of the people back home and to make sure our stories are heard. So we did an excellent job I would say for the first half of the conflict. But after that, of course, there were so many problems.
Okay, so right now, what kind of projects and initiatives are you working on, and what have you worked on so far?
I think, like, following the Pretoria Agreement, a lot of us had to take a moment to reflect on our contribution so far. I personally, I had to take a few minutes and just أطويلك حسب نيرني مسكح هذي أو تجور قالسي كم مأزا تأيوني روميناي تاجيرا. Are there lessons to be learned? Are there things that I need to improve? And also, I had that conversation with myself, and I decided قدم حزي زجوركوا was more of Tigray. أمني على مدرخات كتفلت politicians بسن سرعات بزعوان هنا كوز كفلتو diaspora زلسوا كتأخخ resource mobilize مقوار قال ينيرو حزقين. I feel like the most productive thing that I can do at the moment as an individual is want to empower the civic societies back home and also to make sure the fight for justice and accountability continues. So to that effect, I am still working organizing discussions on accountability and justice. Just to name an example, just last month at Harvard University had عوية زجاجنا نيرنا عطوا زخنا بزحات نأمريكا منجستي human rights watching كالوتن استساتفوا له even كاب تجري ون حنت حفتنا أمتينا so بدعم تبغ زخنا مية تساريحو State Department كالوتن خم تسرح حتى له جن بعوي سؤالك حسوت اللخو توانا تجمعنا نيدقت رح يكون نيوعلنا تجمعون اللؤيو so أو عد زلوا political system نخغير نخستخاخلنا يتحسسوا نتخمت نتحر كوينو أب تجري زلوا ناي civic محاورات كابزخوني خم politicaوي وداوت عنتونو تأخوينهم ديمقراطي نمثلت راح قالوا سخول اللوام السنخون لا عقم ممكن نتقلوا so capacity building comes in different forms and shapes. It can be resource midline عاتهم experience share مقوار spaces نعاتهم مستفعل لأكلات مفلات connection build مالكم خوني خليو so at the moment زجبر again I share this because I think it's important for all of us to reflect on our journey. We have to be intentional. قدم حزي I feel like it was easier because we had clarity of purpose لزنورنا we had unity of purpose. ناي على ما نترت نيرو حدنا ونيرنا حزقنا على ما نترت بزحيلن all of us are looking for guidance and clarity and so that makes it a bit more harder and tough to contribute meaningfully. So to clarity سم أنت كن ركو كلها نشتن جزء وسيدنا نوعلتنا كنت إغنينا زلقنا تأيو I found it to be very helpful personally, and I think it will be helpful if everyone else does that too.
Okay, something that's quite consistent in what you just said in the last couple of minutes is that before Pretoria, after Pretoria. And I think that's a bit of the elephant in the room, if we're honest. Yeah. So before Pretoria, there was a certain element in the way we used to advocate that has definitely drastically changed now.
Yeah.
So before Pretoria, I think you mentioned guidance. Guidance is very important as well. But before Pretoria, there was a lot of interaction between the different state apparatuses, like different offices, different individuals as well as institutions within Tigray of how to move things forward in terms of advocacy.
Right.
Our relationship was quite intertwined.
Right.
So, and that was because, one, there was a middleman, and that middleman were the government of Tigray representatives. And these government of Tigray representatives, they would provide information, they would provide guidance, they would provide up-to-date information that was on the ground that we have suddenly lost now.
Yeah.
So with this vacuum of the loss of information, the loss of sometimes transparency, I would say, the loss of even having that much influence, as being as influential as we were before, what can we do as the diaspora to take back what we had initially, to take back that clarity that you mentioned?
Yeah, I think since you asked the question, I think it's important to clarify some things. When the war began, as far as I'm concerned, there was no any organized preparation whatsoever in the diaspora. There was absolutely nothing. The diaspora was left to itself to fend for Tigray, like to find ways to advocate. ጀመሪሉ ምንም guidance ዝህብ ሰብ አይነበረን ገለ አይነበረን. It's just few individuals ነንባዓልትና ንፋለጥ ተደዋዊና we started initiatives left and right. I remember talking to Mr. Mulgeta and others at Wa'ala, and just brainstorming if we can establish some sort of organization or like an umbrella that will mobilize people. This is before the coming of Om 90 picture. So ብዙሕ ዝበሃል guidance አይነበረን, but I remember maybe like a month or a month and a half into the conflict, both ambassadors came into the picture, Ambassador Fsa, Ambassador Burhana. They were serving as government representatives and they were providing guidance, and I believe eventually ካልኦት ናይ መንግስቲ ተወከልቲ እውን ተወሲኾም ሎም ኣነ ዘለኹሉ ካሊእ ጉጅለ ለለ ተመስሪቱ we were ኣንሕና ብዲያስፖራ ተመሪፅና ናብኡ ንመንግስቲ ወከልቲ ዘይኮናስ ንመንግስቲ ክነማኸር ናይ ዲያስፖራ ድምፂ ክንከውን ኣብቲ መንግስቲ ዝገብሮ ስራሕቲ ተባሂልና ኣቲና. It wasn't that productive. ብዙሕ ከምቲ ዝተሓሰበሉ ኣሳታፊ ገለ ኣይኮነን ነይሩ, ግን ሞኪርና ማለት እዩ. So ብዝኾነ ኮይኑ ሽዑኡ guidance gale ይመጽ ነይሩ እዩ, ግን I want to emphasize to guidance ሽዑ ዝመጽ ዝነበረ it's because ናይ ዓላማ ንጽረት ነይርና እዩ. ኣብቲ ውግእ ዝነበረሉ ግዜስ ናይ ኩሉ ትግራዋይ ዝነበረ ዓላማ ተተኻኢሉ ዓድኻ ነጻ ክትገብር እንተተኻኢሉ ሃገር ንምስረት ተዘይ ኮይኑ ተገዲዱ ግን ህዝብናን ዓድናን ስካብ ህልቂት ምድሓን እዩ ነይሩ ዓላማና. so ሽዑኡ ኩሉ ትግራዋይ ዝተፈላለዩ political opinion ሃልዩ ዝተፈላለዩ መልኻኽቲ ሃልዩ we all came together. But after the Pretoria Agreement, that kind of, it got lost. And it's natural for things to have this kind of progression. But I think Hazoun, the fact that there isn't an official government representative makes it a little bit difficult, to get clarity. حتوت هاليس نمانينا نتقيقو استودبا كايدا قال بزوح يلن. But we have also to understand the Pretoria Agreement forces the Tigray government to be abide by certain regulations, right? Like as a region, you may not necessarily have the right to conduct foreign relations, and maybe having a government representative in the diaspora could be an element of foreign relations, which is a right designated to the Federal Ministry of Foreign Ministry. So there are some legalities, I believe, that are kind of slowing the process, but it would be important if there could be an official representation and way of communicating. Even if that's not possible, though, we can strengthen our communities. Communityታትና እንድሕር ጠንካራታት ኮይነን ንደልዮ ነገራት ንኽመጽእ ንምግባር we will have more leverage. One thing I have learned, diaspora ኩሉ ግዜ ንቅርሺ ክኾን ተሎ እዩ ዝድላ. ቅርሺ ክድሎ እንተሎ ዲያስፖራ ንጉስ እዩ ይጥያቕ በሪን ኩሕኳሕ ንባዕለይ ሓዊሲ ኩላህና ገገዛኹምና መፀና ንጭቕጭቐኩም ማለት እዩ. ግን Tigrayans in the diaspora have more to offer. ካብ ቅርሺ ዝበለጸ ሓሳብ ኣለና, ኣመለኻኽታ ኣለና. So እሱታት ብስነ ስርዓት ኢንተርቴይን ዝግበረሉ ፕላትፎርም ክፍጠር ይግብኦ. And I feel that platform cannot be social media. That platform cannot be Twitter spaces, it can't be clubhouse rooms, it can only be community centers, which is why I am a big proponent of what Wa'ala does. Every year they go from one town to another town and hoping that they will open, small Tigray communities. As the community center ተዝህሉ ነይሩ, there wouldn't have been a need for Tigrayans to go to Twitter space and talk about everything that may not necessarily be, convenient for public spaces. So حزون توانت أجمع كوينو زلوا تجراي أو social media راح connected كوينو. On the ground, on grassroots, there isn't that much connection within our communities. So if we continue to open and build communities ببعده, maybe we will create a space that would eventually give us the kind of power that we need to meaningfully contribute towards the democratization process in Tigray.
Okay, so that's actually a very good answer, because I think what you've done is you've brought it back to the aims of Wala itself, which is building community, making sure you're strengthening ties, because when we talk about being united, I mean, it's Tagaru everywhere, but also your small group of Tagaru that live within your state, that live within your community, first of all, need to be united to actually build a relationship with Tagaru elsewhere, with Tagaru in Europe, Tagaru in Africa. So that is a very, I think, a very important point that you've mentioned. And I think, I mean, we've had a lot of discussions where I've mentioned to you a lot of complaints that I've had where I've said, okay, so I feel like sometimes decisions have already been made when we are asked to contribute to them. So there's a culture of come and join, but are we really contributing? And how do we get past those challenges and obstacles to make sure that we're not imposing our own beliefs or maybe making ourselves bigger than we are when it comes to the internal matters of Tigray, but also having the right level of contribution?
Right. I think it's all a matter of conversation, right? It's all a matter of having an open and candid discussion with one another, including with the leadership back home. So we have to continue creating spaces and holding spaces where we can have this honest conversations without any hesitation. If we do that, then we'll be able to find out what is exactly needed on the ground, because sometimes the information we get could be misleading. We're not privy to everything that's happening on the ground. And so we could be counterproductive in our efforts too, but those challenges can only be tackled if there is an open flow of information. So it is important for community leaders, civic society leaders in the diaspora to have a solid connection and communication with civic society on the ground. We can't only rely on governments. It's important to support our government so long as they have the people's will, but it's also important that we work with non-governmental entities on the ground too, because to have an effective state, you know, the civic society and governments need to work hand in hand. So I think for the diaspora, this is a moment for us to understand things properly. You know, sometimes our perception of things could be different from the reality on the ground, and we can only get to that point if we create alliance and solidarity with civic society on the ground. And media also plays a great role here. Like, we need medias that can effectively portray what's happening on the ground. And we have to be intentional. I feel like we lack intentionality in so many of the things we do. I'll just give a simple example, right? Like, I see us all being outraged, angry, sad, and hurt, rightfully so. But what are we doing to change that? To change that, am I doing my fair share of the job to make sure the brave soldiers that gave leg and arm for my sake are taken care of? So it's good to talk about things on social media. You know, it's good. Freedom is good. But we have to be intentional. Somehow we go at you. Am I really helping, or am I hurting Tigray in the long run, or looking at things comprehensively? So to get a good answer to all of these questions, the solution is community center. Like, strengthening grassroots communication and connections, and that way you can summon any government leader, you can bring them, and you can have a solid conversation. But you can't have that if you're not connected amongst each other. So I think it all goes back to lack of organization on the ground. And I would say for people who were lost in this bigger picture of Ethiopia for so many years, and who tried to find their way back into their roots, and only in the past 2 years, we're doing a great job. We shouldn't be so harsh on ourselves, but there's so much work that needs to be done. And Yeah, like I was saying earlier, the solution is getting connected with civic society on the ground, making sure that they are empowered enough to have an independent way of doing things. And we also have to be very understanding of their challenges too. I'll give you random example. Last time, self-nero na IDPs, and I was working with the organizer, so I wanted them كافتي سلف الزلالة نتجراي كنا نسلف لنا هزو تجراي knows the problem سلفنا it's for the international community primarily and for those who brokered the Pretoria cessation of hostilities agreement. So messages need to be sent in English in a language that they understand, and the letter should be written and communicated to them. They're willing to do it, but they don't have the people to do it. They don't have the capacity. So I didn't understand. So I was like hammering them. I didn't understand them. So it's really important. We want things to be done, but we don't understand the challenge that people on the ground are going through. So while we expect them to do more, it's also important that we find a productive way of helping them to do more.
Absolutely, I can agree with you more. But with some of these challenges that you mentioned, where are the gaps where there is a gap for the diaspora to fit in without actually having to be guided by any other stakeholders, maybe no government intervention, nothing but the diaspora putting itself into that gap to fill the gap? Where are some of these gaps that you have identified throughout the last few years?
Yeah, I would say some of the gaps are, so in our community, I don't think we have a problem of or shortage of people that are dedicated and committed to Tigray's cause. But what we have shortage of is the political commitment and will to empower young leaders, particularly women. You see, women do almost all of the work, but I would say it's only Wa'ala that tries its best to empower the young leaders and women. Everywhere else you go, it's men, and it's elderly men all the time. And no offense to عبيت سوات عبيتي ولدنا ግን you have to understand ناتاتكم بقعة زقلت it's by the people you create. So كم محور كم community مرحي نعقم تتك ونعقم زتك حدش ولا دون تحر زي فريقهم you have failed miserably مالتيو. So إذا خي خون منتي كتسرحوا يجبا and you have to leave space for younger generation to take over. I will give an example of my own. I am one of the people who, joined hands and created Omna at the beginning, right? بأمنا ببايلونا مسارت every 2 years board يمرتيو. So كل تعمت مسملة I could have insisted to say like everyone else does in every other محور you go, but it is not helpful. If I goes ما راح يتنحركوين أنا نخلي inspire غير خواي زود ما راح تكفرني عني. So كل تعمت مسملة I said دقي ما كمرت أنا نوعلي I would adrن I am going to step down بفقادي so others can come and take over. That is what leadership means. But I don't see that happening in so many محورs that we have. So the fundamental gap I see is this lack of intentionality in creating leaders that will take Tigray, farther. This is true for political organizations and for civic societies. And the other problem is, I know and most of the time, we have to respect meritocracy is going to take Tigray places. ዝተምሃሩ ልምዲ ዘለዎም ሰባት ክመርሑና ክንፈቅድ ክንክእል ኣለና. If it is an economy, I don't know, ናይ ቁጠባ ማሕበር እንድሕር ኮይኑ, we have to find a way to lead people that are actually experts on that subject matter to lead us. And we have so many of them. ዘይትሪእዎም ዘይመፁ, it's because the environment is not as hospitable as it should be. ስለዚህ we have to work on meritocracy and also on creating spaces that are inclusive, understanding and welcoming of people of all political backgrounds, all religious backgrounds. So we have to be intentional and understanding of our diversity and create a platform that is accepting of everybody. As small as we are, we're diverse too in so many ways. So the community centers we build, the mahbars we create, the openings we share have to be reflective of that reality. I feel like these are the most important gaps that I have witnessed in the past 2 years, but also to be strategic in our approach, right? Hazi, kam tagaru ta'ina nideli. We really don't know that. I don't think there is a consensus as to what Tigray wants. We all want peace, salam lidalina, but how does that peace come? How is it actualized? We really don't know. We haven't built that consensus because we're not talking about it. If people come with different ideas, they're frowned upon, they're bullied, they're isolated. We're not treating each other with grace. بالتعمي إنا ننف بالتعمي إنا نخرين نوعلتنا إنا نبلز لنا and السلالة it makes Tigray as a collective weaker and weaker بتسألي بقولي لخن تقعينا نخون مالتي so زيهم كلهم نخستخاخلون ندحر كوينهم مستوعب لنا intentional مخان كله لو ما أنت زاروا نجار تجراي نتازدلا تجراي دحرستوس سنة عمد كتنة اللي زدلا تجرايس نعاخ مجيري contribute جبرين نحسب لنا if we don't do this can it's just reactionary إن نخون every generation Tigray is faced with an enemy that wants to wipe us all out and we pay thousands and millions and then ishten salam نركب and then we go back to the same thing because we're not working on things that would strategically liberate Tigray and free our people. So maybe those back home don't have the necessary luxury to think strategically because they're under this imminent threat or survival. But those of us here, especially now, we have the space and the capacity to think أرحق قبلنا نشتي. لو ما أنت زلا تقرأي تأتمثل دحرستو السنة عادتنا وياخد كدية زدلا السنة خدمة تقص كم individual and as a community أنت أي خوازي حلنا بس نسرع strategy وتينا خنسار حلنا. One thing I want to say is like talking to diplomats here in the US and elsewhere, the one thing I understood is their idea of Ethiopia is everything that was fed into them by the likes of Burhanu Negga. This is a project that has been in the making for centuries. نخندي عمتات صعيرهم سريحهم زمت وفرهم يمزحف زلوا people like Burhanu Negga and those in that Ethiopianist camp مالتيو. So أنحنا جنا حزينا نفتنا political space جلنا أتزلنا. جن strategy نحرنينا خوين plan نحرنينا خوين نعوتنا plan نحر زينا جن لو ما عند زخونة تحوت العلان أنا متفق نقوي ساتفق مسألة ناوكالي نبتن and that is a problem. So إذا ما أنت كقرف we have to take lessons from our experiences and do better. So I hope this past years have taught us lessons that are so important for the liberation of Tigray. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean that was a brilliant answer. I think what you said, create great systems that stand the length of time rather than focusing on creating individuals within those societies.
Yeah.
So that's something that you should quote her on because that's a very great statement.
Yeah.
But moving on from this, in terms of creating great systems and all of that, and you said right now, we've kind of dispersed because that initial kind of vision, we're not tunnel visioned anymore.
Yeah.
And that's because of the current situation that we're in. It's not as streamlined. So, I mean, what would you say to people that are seeing things back home unfold in a way where we're kind of like falling back to being somehow okay with the kind of people we were protesting against and we had issues against in the last couple of years? How do we make sure we balance that so that we do not lose that tunnel vision that we had before, whilst at the same time working to make sure that there is sustainable peace? Because without sustainable peace, we can't implement some of the visions that we had, right? So how do you balance those two?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is for all of us to have an educated opening of things, right? Pretoria Agreement, what does it mean? What does it entail? حزي أي حد سوات بق زخون نجار نيتجراي مرحتي نام حرق للقدو نام قال لي قدو تلوق النادر سبيرية and I feel like that comes of course there is emotion which we all have but if you look at it pragmatically and if you understand the Pretoria Agreement then it's obvious that they have to do it. The agreement entails that Tigray will be reintegrated into Ethiopia. What does that mean? So maybe those of you حزتنا ردوا زلقم تخفرهم تلا يتردأكم النيرو مالتيو. I think حد شعتنا دينا جورنا تلحيت أوت إن خوني خليو. So what really is important is for people to really understand what's happening and to agreement time مالتيو. So that we have a pragmatic approach to things, right? And whether Tigray continues to be part of Ethiopia or an independent country, we have to make peace with our neighbors. Tigray doesn't live in an island. We have to find a way ተመሊሶም ንዓና መፅኦም ዘየጥፍኡሉ መንገዲ ማለት እዩ and እሱን ምግባር ብብልሒ ብሜላ እንድሕር ተታሒዙ we just have to understand በቃ these are the facts, this is where we are, what can I do ኣብዚኣ ኮይነ ሕዘብ ዘላ ግዜ ኮይነስ ንትግራይ ከመይ ገይረ እየ ዘውሕሳይና ኢና ንሓስብ ለለና ይመስለኒ so I see a lot of people, making peace with different political actors and even, people that were advocating for our extermination. So as an individual, I have the choice to say, no, I am not going to pay smic with anyone that wished death and havoc on my people. But when we see government officials, they don't have that luxury. They have to go and make peace and find ways. But it can be done without disrespecting the people of Tigray, without inflicting further pain on the people of Tigray. I don't need to use but diplomatically, you have to work with people. And that is the reality of politics, unfortunately. So, expectation and we have to manage our expectations, and we manage our expectations by having an understanding of what is happening on the ground. Again, I go back to the importance of community. You can have these discussions in communities. You can bring experts and explain developments and find a way for people to have clarity as to what's happening and how they can continue to contribute towards changing it if it's not good. Community for people to understand, there has to be a community. ገዛ ማለት እዩ ገዛ እንድሕር ዘይብሉ ቆልዑ ተበቲኖም ይቐርዩ so ገዛ እንድሕር ንይኮይኑ ግን ቆልዑ ይእከቡ ይመኽርሞ ዝሐሸ መንገዲ ፎርጅ ክገብሩ ይኽእሉ እዮም that's what I would say. And another thing is like to ማለት ምስ ሰባት ሰላም ክንፈጥር ዝበፅሐና ወንጀል ክንርስዖ ናይ ግድን ኣይኮነን. For us to make peace with those who inflicted unspeakable level of pain on us, we don't have to forget what they have done to our people. We don't need to forget. We have to find effective ways of getting redress and justice and accountability for our people, but at the same time work towards finding a way of coexistence. That's not who we are as people. What we want is a proper way of, holding people accountable. And is if we have clarity as to actors that are supposed to help us in our fight for accountability and justice, one propositions times mostly. حزي بزح ساعتها كل سبب فتح قمة اللو تتأيق أنت كل اللو يبليو. Okay, what does فتح mean? تايمالتي فتحي تايمالتي how do you translate فتحي ما أزي فتح متجينا نرجع عن حنا نعج ما أزيو فتحنا عيا can be one thing and فتحي to those who survive all the crimes that we have been witnessing from afar could be a different thing. So it's really important that we have a victim-centered approach to everything. And everything we do عم أخل كون زلو guide خجورنا زلو تستجورة تستجقنا تبدلت هزويو تهزون السوتايو زدلي. So in order to understand what هزب زدلي we have to connect with the هزبي. Not only the government but the هزبي. هزبي من تيوكل government and civic society. So again it goes back to what I was saying earlier to create bridges between the people in Tigray and us here in the diaspora. But another very important thing is to have a political representation of Tigrayans wherever we live. Here in the US, for example, we need Tigrayans to run for Congress and for Senate. We need people to be on the decision-making table. And that can only be done if we empower the younger generation here. I'll give you a simple example. You have Ilhan Omar, who's from Somalia. She does a great job of advocating for her people. We don't have anybody, even Eritrea and Ukas, Allahum Hada. And Hnagan Hada Vilnan. It's not because goes at سواسل زيلنا أي مثلاً نجن كم community خندق في زلنا أزيوم من حرجرنا I think we'll find a way to understand how things should be done so Tigray is never faced with the kind of challenge that it was faced and that it continues to be faced حزون.
Okay, I have one quite difficult question for you, Meaza.
Yeah.
And I didn't give you any heads up about this question, but I'm sure you're going to you're going to give it a just answer. What comes first, justice or peace?
For me, justice. And I have always been an advocate of justice because you can never have a sustainable justice if you don't, peace if you don't have justice. I'll give an example. I feel the Eritrean government is responsible for so much of pain Tigrayans have experienced throughout generations. I have talked about this openly about my family. I had a sister. I hope she's still alive. حفتين يراتني. ቀደም she went ናብ ኤርትራ and ኢትዮ ኤርትራ ውግእ ተጀሚሩ ኣብኡ ተዓፅያ ካብ ገዛ ኣመፅኦም ወሲዶማ like they did so many other Ethiopians. She was abducted from her house and we still don't know where she is. ኣበይ ከም ዘላ ኣይንፈልጥን ብህይወት ድያ ኣላ ሞይታ ድያ ኣይንፈልጥን for over 20 years. This is a sister that I have never had the opportunity to grow up with. And Nata, this is not a story unique to me, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, Tigrayans who live on the borderlines with Eritrea have went through this. And there was no government that advocated for my sister and people like her. The Eritrean government was not held accountable for the pain that it inflicted on people like my sister. And that has emboldened the Eritrean government, which led to committing the kind of crimes that it committed during the past 2+ years. It kind of changed who I am as a person. I am the person I am today because I want to get justice for my sister, and also because my mom ጓሌና ወለት እህና ወለት ስለዚ ሓለፈት በቃ ናደይ ሓፍተኝ ፍትሒ ከመጽ እንድሕር ኮይነስ I remember having this thought in my mind when I was like ሸሞንተ ዓመት ገለ ቆልዓ ኮይና በቃ ሕጊ ከመሃርየ ንኢሳያስና ፍርድ ቤት ክወስደለኒ but that's all I know because Isaias as a government took away everything. The most precious thing in my life is my mom and ሓፍተይ so ክልቲኦም ካወሰደለይ I have to find a way to get justice. So to الشعوب ፍትሒ ስለዘይመጸ معات أشحات تجارو كوجزهم تجاوم بتلاقي نا إيروب كناما افتباد مزالم بس دامو جلز سات بزحات تجاوم أوي كم زلوا سلزي تفلت الشعوب and no one spoke up on their behalf. They were not part of any negotiation. They were not part of any discussion. What did it do? Isaias felt like he can do whatever he pleases with the people of Tigray. So the lack of justice has contributed to the emboldenment of Eritrea as a country and Isaias as a leader to commit the kind of crimes he committed. So it is important to give priority to Fithi. When people advocate for justice and accountability, salam it's because we understand the importance of Fithi to get salam. We see it in Sudan. Sudan abzinawarom ናይ እርስ በርስ ግጭት genocide ምክንያት ስነ ስርዓት ዘለዎ accountability and justice mechanism አይተገበረን. The West has used that opportunity to score a political point and they took some action. So ቃልካ ሽፍን ቢሎም ሓሊፎም. Now see what's happening. So it's really important that it shouldn't even be a matter of حتى ونس كونه يخلن سلام كمص እንድሕር ኮይኑ ዘላق ዘለዎ ፍትሒ እዩ ክመጽ ዘሎ ፍትሒ እንድሕር ዘይላ تمالي أبونا دينا وقدم يستقطع القلعة سؤال كرسي عقاية عريق كان ورث التواهيل صباح نقول برتالي الخك على اسم خانة من مزات أرات النجاري كونن سلازخهم أونا يخون because we don't need هت أنا تاني نعوي تجادلي كونية لهم aspire كدليو I دلن I respect تجادلتي with all I have جن I don't want any hit أنتجراي تلعيل تجادلي كون تماهيرو هو تغير حكيم كون ممر كون جلنبر كجادل برت كلعل I don't wish that السن خي خون لا فتح قمة زلوا that's why we have to continue our fight and struggle for justice and accountability in Tigray.
Absolutely. Okay, so what role do you think the diaspora can play in making sure we are seeking justice, and also how do you see the diaspora strengthening in the next coming years? And including yourself, because you are a diaspora, include yourself in the answer as well. So what is your role that you're going to play in the next couple of years? What do you see for yourself?
Yeah, like I said earlier, فتح بستفعل من قد نديز قلت فتح مالت تاريخ كم مسنا ديو فتح مالت عد خمل سقط الناس توم زت فوان كالوتني عالم لخ أكلات نجوبهم كفت مجاريو فتح مالت prosecution خوني خليه فتح مالت recognition مجناي خوني خليه. So there are so many things that we can do. For example, حزي we're working with the UK Parliament زخوننا فتح صراحة تتأثر حلو أو there are so many things that are being done behind the scenes. So it's really important that we stay connected and find ways for people to contribute in a way that they can. Artistatna بزعوا تاريخنا تدريفهم صحافتي بزعوا تاريخنا تسندهم حرستاي نتتاريخو فليتو زت أفو نجار ملسون كفري أبز جورو تعرف نجاريتها تحجزهم. If we all have Tigray at the core of our activity, then we find a way to fight for justice. As to me, I was doing full-time time ናይ ትግራይ ስራሕ እየሰርሕ ነይረ ድሕሪ ሕዚ ግን I have to one thing I want to say is it's really important to develop ourselves as individuals ንሕና ተዘይተማሂርና ንሕና ብጽቡቕ ቦታ እንድሕር ዘይሃሊና ንዓድና ምንም ክንገብረላ ኣይንኽእልን all of us here ዝሓለፈ 2 ዓመት ንእሽተይ ንትግራይ contribute ዝገበርናዮ it's because of the work that we have done on ourselves in the years preceding like prior to the Tigray genocide beginning so ሕዚ እውን we have to continue developing ourselves as individual wala ኣብዚ ዓዲ solid ዝኾነ ናይ ትግራይ community እንድሕር ዘይሃሊና ብዛዕባ ፍትሕን ተጠያቅነትን ንገብሮ ቃልሲ ማንም ዞር ኢሎ ይሰምዐናን like I said earlier if we had ክልተ ሰለስተ ዝኾኑ policy makers in America politics ተዝህሉና ነይሮም things would have been a lot more different than how they transpired ማለት እዩ so ሕዚ this is a time for us to find a strategic way of getting justice for our people and we also have to understand ንፍትሒ ዝግበር ቃልሲ ብጣዕሚ ድካምን ግዜ ወሳድን ክኸውን ይኽእል እዩ ምክንያቱ ፍትሒ it's not only about حقي فتحي is also about politics like I always say so ني عدتات political stand بزتغير قطري ان احنا نفتح نقور قالسون استفلالي يخون يخليو سلازي we have to prepare ourselves for the long fight for the hard fight but we have to believe somehow we have to continue fighting for our people to get justice because getting justice is بتعمي critical for us to get فتحي سلازي I will continue to develop myself as an individual. At the same time, I'll continue to do the work that I have been doing and that I'm doing with different government officials and civic society in Tigray. And I also want to encourage people to focus on themselves. Mental health is a real issue. Being kind towards one another. I know I'm taking too much of your time, but I want to speak about the importance of understanding, the importance of giving grace towards one another. The way we're treating each other is just really scary. بتعمي يزفرح ناوز زفلتكان زي فلتكان ولا تقبلوا تعرفك. It's okay. Again, we have to understand. سبب إن حرت تعرفنا لهم عنتي. We have to understand that's because they're hurting. They're hurting, they're looking for answers. And no one is giving them that answer. Maybe they feel like you're the one to give them the answers. Having that kind of responsibility is humbling. So you have to be able to give them grace. لما أنت حدا سمعت أنت حر ملك قبل تعرف كخنردقهم كأللنا. The back and forth that we're doing on social media is going to break us apart. And it's really important that community leaders, religious figures, take this to heart and really work towards finding a space for people to heal. Because everything that you see in أنواع الحزيز تعرف زبقة زلوسة, it's because بقى سلسة جودة وشتري. So حدا إنه علتنا كنرا I have received my share of my first share of the harassment, bullying. بالتالي كوني وعلتها community خمت أنت اللي بتعمي يزحمن because there are so many misunderstandings. ناي من قستوكلت يوم يخفلهم nobody gets paid like everyone else. كله بهوتون كاريرون قلا راح ريح ميدا يقالس نيرو. So خمسة نجارسة متشيخة تعرفوا تقواني وقالت لها it pushes people away. We have so many brilliant عقم زلهم سوات سوقن تي backlash to bullying سلازفرهم contribute يقولون يهادم يحبوا من لوز يقبر eventually Tigray. So for that problem to go away, it's important for all of us to be kind. And I just whenever I receive bullying from my community, I don't respond. I don't say anything. I find a way to talk to them or maybe send someone to talk to them. I don't say anything of public words. I will never ever attack a single Tigrayan of the Gozi. Naigazaha Tagam, out Hanitsalai, I too. Pulsha Gaza, so Tigray Malet, Tigray community, Gaza Unaya. So if any Tigray does me like wrong, I will find a way to handle that within my community. Majamarta. Kindness is really important and understanding that we all are hurting. كلنا in hurting نقبر زلنا. So we have to find a way for all of us to heal together as a collective.
So I would like to end our discussion with one very important question. What is your vision for Tigray? Hada, Khalta, what's your vision for the diaspora's contribution in Tigray? And Celeste, what is the vision for your contribution in Tigray?
Yeah, that's a very loaded question. My vision for Tigray is to be free and to progress, to develop, for the women of Tigray to be free. My ultimate vision is to see a female president of Tigray. That's what I want. not because I'm female, but because female have shown you guys time and again that we are capable of leading. So my vision, my ultimate dream is to have a democratic and liberated Tigray led by women. And to that effect, the diaspora has to take, we have so much power. It doesn't need to get into our heads and we don't need to go again. عقم لنا نحنا influence كنجبر نخيلنا. So influence نجورو لمبوتات كنمرت لنا. حز كلكم تريد لكم. Pretoria سمعنت no single goal. أبز جبر diplomatic relationship no single goal تنستيتي. أبز جبر نايدق مهنت زررب no single goal نستيتي. مو أبز اخترخونات لكم كن وعرو قالت ولنا أبي دامولة وعرت ولوه like مالك. Now, if you think, I am very much grateful. Whenever you see me, goes okay, you say the same thing to Mela, to Axum, to Aziza, and everyone else that you see doing such a great job. But there are so many strong women in Tigray that can do more than us. Why don't you speak up when you don't see a single woman holding space? Issue a statement. Talk to the government. Talk to the political leaders. If you don't do that again, so you have to find a way to empower the women of Tigray. تقاليسا أقاليسا نعدنا تصوتينين قدمون حزون مورز تقول على لساتنين سلازي بحد إدنا خلنا نجوج سلازي نقل you have to find a way to empower women. That's my hope. That's what I wish the diaspora to do. I didn't see a single organization issuing a statement complaining about the lack of inclusivity in the current political sphere in Tigray. كله بزعوا خالي political party يزارب. No one talks about the lack of women in this decision-making tables. But whenever there is a problem, now we go يخم تموتوا. نبدأ كنستيو. أو عديكون ولا أبدأ جمالتيو. سلزي Tigray كتعبن تحركوينا. For the Tigray that I want to see, for ta معبلتي ta سلام زلوا, democracy زلوا, Tigray نخدمت, men and women need to have equal participation, and the women have to be brought forward. So أفزي أخسر حيوناتي وانا تعري. And for me, on a personal capacity, like everyone else, I need to take a moment to heal. I think all of us have been exposed to so much trauma the past 2+ years. There were times where we spent sleepless nights. ምንም ዘይደቀስና ኣብ ህይወትና ሞያና ጥዕናና ገለ ሁሉ ጠንጢናዮ ትግራይ እምበር ካልእ ህይወት ዘሎ ስለዘይ ይመስላልና ነበረ ግን እሱ I think ዕንዝርና እዩ ዝመስለና I think ኣነ ንባዕለ ዓንዚረ እየ ነይረ ምክንያቱስ ንትግራይ ኣነ እንድሕር ዘይልኹስ ንትግራይ ምንም ኣይገብረላን ምህላይ ማለት like existing and living are two different things. Yes, I do exist, but I didn't live the past 2+ years. So I have to find a way to live so I can contribute to Tigray meaningfully. As I continue my fight and my struggle for Tigray, I will also try to find ways to empower myself further and to heal.
I think those were amazing answers. I think she deserves another round of applause. Yeah, I mean, that was amazing. Although your answers, I couldn't have, agreed with you more, especially the part about women, I must emphasize.